I was running late that morning, the kind of late where your chest feels tight and every clock seems to mock you. The train station was buzzing, suits rushing, phones ringing, the usual symphony of Monday chaos. I clutched my coffee like it was a lifeline, the one small comfort before stepping into another day at the office where I was invisible, replaceable, forgettable. That's when I saw him. An old man, frail, hunched against the biting cold, with nothing but a thin coat that looked like it belonged to another decade. His hands trembled as he rubbed them together, breath fogging in the frigid air. People passed him without a glance. Eyes down, headphones in, immune to his presence. But for some reason, I couldn't. Something about the way his eyes darted at every passing coffee cup, every steaming paper lid, as if warmth itself was a thing he might never touch again. I froze. My train was arriving in 2 minutes. My coffee was still full, still hot. And yet, I walked over and pressed the cup into his shaking hands. He blinked up at me, startled, as though I'd broken some unwritten rule of the station. His lips quivered, trying to form words, but all he managed was a whisper, hoarse and fragile. "Thank you." I didn't stay. I didn't ask his story. The train roared in, and I left him there on the bench, clutching my coffee like it was treasure. I never thought I'd see him again. But 3 months later, on the happiest day of my life, when the music swelled and the church doors opened, he walked in. Not as a beggar, not as a stranger, but as the father of the CEO who signed my paycheck. And in that moment, everything I thought I knew about kindness, fate, and the hidden eyes that watch us in silence changed forever. The wedding day had already felt like a dream stitched together with trembling hands. White lace, nervous laughter, the scent of lilies heavy in the air. My family sat in the front rows, proud and glowing, while my colleagues filled in the pews behind them, curious to see me outside the sterile gray walls of the office. But let me rewind. Because to understand why his arrival shook me so deeply, you need to know who I was back then. At work, I was no one. An assistant at a sprawling corporation, a shadow who fetched coffee and carried folders while executives spoke in clipped voices about big moves and bold strategies. I didn't belong to their world of glass offices and corner views. I was the one who stayed late, typing numbers that weren't mine, watching promotions sail past me like ships I'd never board. And yet, outside of that world, I had carved a fragile piece of joy for myself. His name was Daniel, my fiancé. He wasn't rich, wasn't famous, but he saw me. He believed in me when I couldn't. We planned a small wedding, nothing grand, just love stitched together in vows. Still, I couldn't shake the memory of that morning at the station. It lingered like an unfinished sentence. Some nights, lying awake, I wondered if the old man had found shelter, if he was even alive. I didn't tell Daniel about it, not because it was shameful, but because it felt like a secret between me and the universe. A single moment of choice, keep my warmth or give it away. So when the church doors opened on that crisp autumn afternoon, and I saw the same man from the station step inside in a tailored suit, walking with quiet authority, my heart stuttered. He wasn't frail now. He wasn't forgotten. He was someone powerful. And somehow, fate had threaded our lives together in a way I never could have imagined. When the old man, no, when he walked into the church, the air shifted. I didn't recognize it at first, but I recognized him. That trembling figure on the bench, cradling my coffee as if it were life itself. Except now he stood tall, his posture regal, his eyes sharp and piercing. The whispers began almost immediately, soft ripples spreading through the crowd. That's him. Isn't that the CEO's father? He never comes to public events. And in that moment, I realized the truth. The man I had given my coffee to wasn't a stranger at all. He was hidden royalty in the kingdom of my company. Later, I would come to understand the rules of his world, though at first they came to me in fragments, through overheard conversations and careful observations. Rule 1. He lived simply, almost anonymously, despite his son's empire. The suit he wore now was a costume for occasions. In his daily life, he moved among ordinary people unseen, as if testing the pulse of the world. Rule 2. He believed in tests. Quiet ones. Invisible ones. He never announced them, never revealed what he was looking for, but every encounter, every choice people made in his presence, was a kind of measure, a mirror of who they truly were. Rule 3. He never forgot. I didn't know this then, standing at the altar, clutching Daniel's hands as my heart pounded louder than the organ. I only knew that the man I had pitied, the man I had left on that bench with my coffee, was staring at me now with an intensity that felt personal. And suddenly, the question became not just why was he here, but what did it mean that he had come? Because if kindness was a test, then the results were about to reshape my entire life. The reception buzzed with champagne laughter, clinking glasses, and the swirl of music, but my mind kept snagging on him. The CEO's father, the man I'd met in such a different skin. I tried to tell myself it was coincidence, that maybe he hadn't even recognized me. But every time I glanced across the room, his eyes found mine. Not with menace, not even with curiosity, something deeper. Like he was waiting for me to come over. When I finally gathered the courage, my heart thumping against the lace of my gown, he was standing by the window, looking out at the city lights. The skyscrapers glittered like stars trapped in glass. He didn't turn when I approached, but he spoke. "You didn't ask me for anything that day." His voice was stronger now, full of gravity, yet tinged with something wistful. I swallowed. I just thought you looked cold." At that, he chuckled softly, a sound like gravel being turned over. "So many walked past me. But you stopped. You gave what you had. Do you know how rare that is?" His words wrapped around me like riddles, and the puzzles began to unfold in my mind. Why had he been at that station at all, dressed so poorly, shivering like a forgotten man? Why did he keep speaking as if it had all been intentional, deliberate, as though my choice had been part of something larger? And why, of all days, of all moments, had he chosen to appear at my wedding? He finally turned to face me, eyes glinting with a kind of approval I hadn't earned. Most people think kindness is a transaction. You give, you expect. But real kindness, he tapped his chest. Real kindness echoes. It tells me everything I need to know. Before I could ask him what he meant, Daniel appeared at my side, beaming, oblivious to the undercurrent threading the conversation. The old man simply patted his shoulder and smiled. "You've chosen well." And with that, he drifted back into the crowd, leaving me with a head full of questions and a heart full of unease. It was only the beginning. The weeks after the wedding blurred into a quiet rhythm. Thank you notes, unpacked gifts, the soft chaos of beginning married life. Daniel and I settled into our small apartment, stringing fairy lights across the balcony, whispering promises about the future in the glow of midnight. But I couldn't shake him. The old man. The way his words had coiled themselves around my thoughts like ivy. Real kindness echoes. Then, one morning at the office, everything snapped into focus. I had been summoned. Me, the assistant who was rarely noticed, let alone called into the executive floor. My hands were clammy as the elevator climbed, the polished numbers blinking toward a floor I'd only dreamed of. When the doors opened, the CEO himself was waiting. Beside him stood his father, the same man I had handed my coffee to, now dressed in a quiet gray suit, watching me with the same measured gaze. "Come in," the CEO said, his tone clipped, unreadable. I sat across from them, the city sprawling behind the glass wall, and tried not to shake. The father spoke first. "I asked my son to bring you here. He doesn't usually listen to me in business matters, but in this, he agreed." I blinked. I don't understand." He leaned forward, his voice low, deliberate. "That morning at the station was not an accident. I wanted to see who still noticed the invisible, who would give when there was nothing to gain. You didn't know me. You didn't want anything. You gave anyway." My stomach flipped. "You were testing people?" His eyes softened. "Not people. You. And you passed." I didn't know whether to feel honored or violated, chosen or manipulated. But then he spoke the words that shattered me. "I've decided you don't belong at a desk in the shadows. You belong where choices matter." And just like that, my life split into two paths, the one I'd been trudging and the one he was offering, without telling me what it truly cost. At first, I thought it was a dream come true. The CEO's father had seen something in me, something no one at the company ever noticed. And suddenly doors began opening that had always been locked. I was transferred out of the assistant pool and into a new department. Strategy. A place where ideas shaped futures, where the air was thick with ambition and tension. My badge got me into meetings I'd once been shooed away from. My name was suddenly on email chains that mattered. But with the opportunity came suspicion. "Why her?" I overheard whispered in the break room. "She doesn't have the background. She must have something on him." The eyes of my colleagues sharpened, their smiles thinning. Every success I had was dissected, every mistake magnified. The kindness I'd once given freely was now a weapon people thought I'd wielded for gain. And then there was Daniel. Sweet, steady Daniel. He celebrated my promotion with champagne, lifted me when I doubted myself. But I saw the flicker in his eyes when I told him about the CEO's father, about the strange way fate had folded us together. "Why you?" he asked, not unkindly, but with a quiet confusion that echoed in my chest. Because even I didn't know the answer. The deeper I stepped into this new role, the more I felt the old man's presence. He didn't hover, didn't instruct, but he appeared at the edges of my days. A glance in the lobby, a nod in the cafeteria, sometimes a single phrase spoken like a riddle. Remember, what you choose when no one watches matters most. It became a refrain, both comfort and curse. Because soon, choices started arriving. Late-night proposals slid across my desk, asking me to sign off on numbers that didn't add up. Quiet requests from executives to look the other way. Flattering offers that dangled advancement in exchange for silence. Every decision felt like another test. But now the stakes were no longer just my conscience. They were my career, my marriage, my very identity. And somewhere in the shadows, I could feel him watching, weighing, waiting. The breaking point came on a night when the city outside the windows glowed like fire. I had been called into a boardroom meeting long after most had gone home. The table was scattered with papers, projections, deals written in numbers that felt slick with deceit. One of the executives, a man who never once remembered my name before my promotion, leaned forward and tapped the folder in front of me. "All you have to do is approve this. Small adjustments, nothing anyone will notice. You sign, and trust me, you'll never worry about your future again." The others around the table nodded, their eyes gleaming like wolves. But I noticed something they didn't. In the far corner of the glass room, almost invisible in the reflection of the city lights, he was there. The CEO's father. Watching. Silent. His expression unreadable. I felt my throat tighten. This was it. The test. My mind flashed back to the station, the trembling hands around my coffee, the hoarse whisper of "thank you." That had been easy. This was not. Here, the cost was clear. If I refused, I'd make enemies powerful enough to end my career. If I agreed, I'd betray everything that had brought me here in the first place. I picked up the pen. My hand hovered over the paper. One of the executives smirked. "She knows which side her bread is buttered on." But then I remembered his words. Real kindness echoes. What you choose when no one watches matters most. Except someone was watching. I put the pen down. My voice shook, but it was steady enough. "No, I won't sign this. Find someone else." The room went cold. The smirk vanished. I could feel the heat of their anger, the unspoken threats. But when I looked to the corner, he was gone. The wolves tore into me that night, their words sharp, their laughter cruel. I knew I had made enemies. I walked out of that building thinking my career was over. What I didn't know was that I had passed the final trial, and everything that came next would change the course of my life forever. I didn't sleep that night. My mind spun with visions of termination letters, whispered ridicule, Daniel's disappointment when I told him I'd thrown it all away. But when I arrived at work the next morning, instead of a pink slip, I was escorted, wordlessly, to the top floor. The CEO's office. He was waiting for me, but he wasn't alone. His father sat beside him, hands folded on his cane, his eyes alight with something I had never seen before, pride. The CEO leaned forward. "My father has been running his own experiments, it seems. And you've passed them all." I blinked, heart pounding. "Experiments." The old man chuckled, his voice warm now, stripped of riddles. "Not experiments. Proofs. I've spent years watching the people around my son, executives, assistants, partners. Everyone is eager to gain, to climb, to take. But you—" He paused, as though savoring the words. "You gave. Twice. First with coffee, then with courage." I felt tears sting my eyes. All the doubt, the whispers, the late nights wondering if I was a fool, it all cracked open in that moment. The CEO spoke again, his voice steadier than his father's but tinged with respect. "We need people like you in leadership, not because of your resume, but because of your compass. If you want it, the position is yours." I couldn't breathe. Me, the assistant who once felt invisible, now being offered a seat where choices mattered. I thought of Daniel, of the vows we had spoken, of the life we were building. I thought of the old man on the station bench, his hands trembling around a cup of coffee that had cost me a few dollars but changed the entire trajectory of my existence. And in that moment, I understood the legacy he was leaving me. That kindness isn't a transaction. It's a seed. You never know when or where it will bloom. Months later, I found myself standing again in the same train station. The rush of footsteps, the metallic screech of trains, the smell of burnt coffee, it was all the same. But I was not. This time, I wasn't clutching a paper cup like a shield against the world. I carried something else, the quiet knowledge that every moment holds weight, that every choice echoes louder than we realize. I sat on a bench and watched people move past the invisible ones. The woman curled up with a blanket too thin for the weather, the young man asking for spare change, the janitor pushing his cart unnoticed. And I thought, it could be them. It could be me. It could be anyone who changes everything. Daniel joined me, slipping his hand into mine. He didn't need to say it, but I knew he understood now. That one small act of kindness had rippled into our lives, reshaping the ground beneath our feet. I looked down at the cup of coffee I had bought that morning, not for me, but for whoever needed it. Because that was the lesson, the legacy. What you give when no one's watching, when it costs you something real, has the power to circle back in ways you can't predict. A wedding, a job, a future. I stood, scanned the crowd, and pressed the cup into another pair of shivering hands. This time, I stayed long enough to see the smile bloom, and I whispered the words that had once been whispered to me. Thank you.